Welcome back, everyone, to NFA Live, episode number. We must be getting into the 50s now, surely. Almost. Let's say it's episode 50, just to make it a big one. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining from wherever you are on this particularly green day. So I hope you're all in a good mood as a result. Welcome back, of course, to Rob from Digital Asset News. Welcome, Rob.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And of course, Ben from Into the Cryptoverse. Hello, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me as well.
Pleasure. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining. If to all those watching, if you're not already subscribed to Rob and Ben, then you should seriously consider subscribing to them. There are links. Their handles are on the screen now, and we'll leave links in the description too. Because if you're not subscribed to them, you're missing out on hot alpha and crypto info. Just saying. Okay, so gents, we're going to talk. We've got a few things to talk about today. Can I just remind everyone watching as well? We'll do the usual format. We've got a few things, a few topics that we want to discuss, which we'll go through first. But if you guys have any burning questions to ask Rob, Ben, or even myself, then please do post them in the comments, and we'll select a few as we go along, and then sort of try and answer them at the end. If you want to know, where Rob got that painting that's to his right, or what's behind any of those doors behind Ben, now is the time to ask. You may not get answers to those, but who knows? Okay, so gents, let's start with it's not been the busiest week for crypto, I think, because we're still sort of in that ETF hangover phase, and it's kind of everything's just been sort of ticking along, except for Solana, which had a big outage the day before yesterday. It was down for about 5 hours. The markets sort of got a little bit spooked by it, but nothing really too bad. I was kind of when I heard that news, I sort of went straight to the charts, expecting to see blood everywhere, and was a bit surprised not to. So this obviously has a big impact for Solana, regardless of price action. And I think it has something to say to the whole layer one space in general. So, Rob, can I start off with you? Does this latest outage, does it affect your views of Solana at all, of the layer one space in general, and people's attitudes to it?
It doesn't. It just goes to show you that every time we think that we know where the market's going, that the market slaps you right in the face and says you don't know what's happening. And it's the same thing. Like, I remember, just last year we were talking about how Solana was kind of stagnant. It was down around $9, and people were, or 12 or whatever it was. I'm sure people will correct me in the comment section on that one. But as time goes on, we're just like, oh, well, it's going to be the next best thing. It's going to be awesome. We should just ape into that, and we should YOLO, and we should sell everything and get into it. And all of a sudden it goes down. People are like, wait, that's not true. So actually, Guy, if you do me a favor, just throw up the screen just to keep this fair for everybody. I actually put this meme together because there was no good memes, and I thought this would help out, help ease the pain for all Solana holders and everybody else who hates Solana. And I said, look, it has been down, and it's actually the truth. And then I put this out, and it said yesterday, I go, look, we're healing, and everything's going great. And then in honor of today, it feels good, right? 2 days since the Solana shutdown. So everybody should be happy. Everybody should be happy with what is going on. But I must say, we did a video on this, and this is the kind of things that I get. And it's, someone saying that, hey, if you're investing into Solana, you're investing into enslavement. There's all different types of opinion out there, and you should never invest in Solana because it's centralized. And what about the other cryptos that go down? And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. I didn't remember this, but just to keep this fair, to as like a mulligan from off of my show, Arbitrum did go down December 15th. That is true. We had Polygon that went down in 2022. It may have gone down again. I'm not for sure. Another layer 2 solution. And there's been others that people have pointed out that, look, these things have gone down. You never talked about it. I'm like, well, I talked a little bit about it, but just when Solana goes down, sometimes I just find it hilarious, and I like to put these things together. Does that mean that things change? Things change a little bit, but as taking a look at data, there's a great website, app.artemis.xyz, and you can take a look at active addresses, transactions, revenue, fees, market cap, and growth. And one of the things I took a look at, today's Thursday, right? If my memory serves correctly. I think on Tuesday was when we had the shutdown 2 days ago, right? And well, before that, let's just go before that. The actual active addresses, you had Solana 730,000, Near protocol at 1.15 million, Polygon 657,000, Ethereum 407. So if you could take, these different, like a layer 2, like a Polygon, you could take Optimism, you can take whatever else you want and put them all together. Yeah, it's going to dwarf out a lot of things that are going on of the other layer ones, like a SWE, like an Avalanche, like a Cardano. But the next day, Solana went from 730,000. And because there was an outage of 5 hours, it did slip a little bit, 623,000. But look, it's still above Ethereum layer 1, still above SWE, still above Avalanche, which a great chain especially for gaming, and also Cardano at 47,000. And then of course, take a look at the transactions, it's the same thing. We can take a look at it, says Tuesday. Yeah, the day before, you're looking at 30 million. Okay.
Yeah.
Next day, 22 million, Near at 4.1 million, Polygon 3 and so on and so forth. And then we're right back at it. So I understand what people are saying, like, hey, you got to call that out. And mostly it was from, Cardano folks. And I have nothing against Cardano. I own Cardano. I like Cardano. I love everybody in the ecosystem. I do. But just remember that nothing's perfect. Like on the roadmap itself, I just pulled this up today in Basho. It talks about there should be, of course, to get this into the next evolution, to get to Voltaire, there should be side chains. There should be things like that. I even asked the question, like, are side chains even up and running? And somebody, VRE president, they said, yeah, we've had it from some side chain that's up. And I was like, what about Midnight, which is supposed to be this next big thing? And then people reminded me that, well, Midnight, when it first came out, was supposed to be a side chain, or it alluded to it. And now there's no mention of Cardano. And it looks like they're going to work in tandem, but it's not a sidechain itself. But there are things going on with Cardano. So I know people say, well, Cardano's perfect. I'm like, if it was perfect, it wouldn't have this roadmap where it wants to go. I think it's a great chain, but don't say like, oh, it's the best thing of all time. And that's the whole thing for everything across the board, all the different layer 1s, all the different layer 2s. There's a long way to go. And I just threw this up, the EUTXO. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it shows you, of course, transactions in the unspent EUTXO, spent transactions. For some reason, even this site's not working. Hold on.
I haven't seen this site before.
Oh, you're going to love this. It's great. I think I had it on too long. That was the problem. We'll see.
Right.
You're like, sure. Oh, okay. What this shows is, because people, the biggest knocking around is like the transactions are slow. There's not many TPS, right? But within these transaction blocks, these are all the transactions that are in it. Now, if you put this on, you can show what's actually unspent versus the actual spend. And if you go down here, you can see where it says intra-wallet transfers, unspent, foreign account transfers, and it breaks it down between like, this is from wallet to wallet, this is what is actually staying in your wallet. So total transfers is 145. So when people say this, I'm like, in all honesty, no, we can't use TPS, but we can have a nice little look at what's going on, and that's in the Cardano ecosystem. Can it keep up? That's anybody's guess. But I just want to, the whole point of this whole thing that I want to get to is that just because like you love your whatever it is, right? I diversify quite heavily. And as we all know, and even to the point of degeneracy, which I think we all know that too. But the thing is, you got to remember is that a lot of cryptos die. And it's no different than any business that's out there. Unless you do the right things and get the right interaction with the people, and you do it faster, cheaper, easier, and you have great marketing and you really put it out there, you're going to fail. And 50% of cryptos have already failed. And it's just like businesses in the world, right? This is from the BLS, this last thing I'll say. 20% of new businesses fail during the first 2 years, 45 during 5 years, and 65 during the first 10 years. So I know like everybody loves it, but just remember this: things die, things don't make it. And I think now we're getting in the evolution of where we need to actually put our money where our mouth is and actually grow. So that's a very long answer for what happened.
It's a great answer, Rob. It's a great answer. Very, very comprehensive. And I mean, you're absolutely right, pointing out that I mean, Solana has its problems and has had many problems in the past. And well, I mean, I guess at the rate we're going, maybe has a few problems ahead of it as well. But no blockchain is perfect, and I mean that takes up most of people's mental bandwidth on crypto Twitter most of the time, doesn't it? Debating the various shortcomings of various blockchains that everyone's sort of very partisan about. So, yeah. There is a long way to go.
I'm surprised it was only what 20% of companies fail in the first year.
I know. I always thought it was 50, but it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ben, so have you got a particular view on this, Ben? I mean, a couple of things that occurred to me about this Solana outage and what we saw in the wake of it. One, I was kind of surprised not to see sort of Solana killers. Rivals like Sui, Aptos, Say are the ones that spring to mind. I was surprised not to see them really pump on the back of Solana having these issues. And it also sort of raised the question with me. It's like, obviously, like, you want a blockchain, or in theory, you want a blockchain that works. If you have a blockchain that has outages, that's no good. But the fact that Sol didn't see a sell-off and the fact that its competitors didn't see a massive rally, does that say to you at all that maybe people don't really care in the same way that I think maybe many people don't really care about decentralization? Kind of going to Rob's point, it's like they want something that works well, that is cheap and that works, most of the time, which, to be fair to Solana, usually it does, because we were on this show last week or the week before saying, how pleasant Solana generally is to use when it's working. So Ben, I mean, do you think people just don't really care about that aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of like, I think a lot of it is when the news actually breaks. Like, if that news had broken in 2022, which it did, oftentimes it was not a good thing, right? But we were in a pretty large, bear market at the time, where like everyone was looking for a reason, for asset prices to go down. So it's sort of like, when you're in a downtrend, a lot of times people don't care about good news, right? There was plenty of good news in 2022, but most people just didn't care about it. And it's sort of the reverse now, right? It doesn't really matter. I think there's also, when you have like a new asset class like crypto, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains as well. And like, that doesn't necessarily mean that like the chain can't survive if it faces those, but it has to figure out how to overcome that stuff. And I mean, so far it seems like it's been able to do that. As far as like my views on Solana and where it stands with like Ethereum and Cardano and all the other ones, I still think Ethereum is going to retain the number 2 spot by market cap. Like, so I don't really see it relinquishing that spot, at least not in anytime soon, right? It's hard to say what's going to happen in like 10 years, but I don't really see Ethereum relinquishing that spot anytime soon. But I mean, Solana is definitely one of the closer ones to it. It kind of goes back to, and I agree, I think there are a lot of people that say they care about like decentralization, but then when it actually comes down to it, what really people care about the most is just the price is what it really comes down to for the people that are not as active, right? Like if you're active in the space, you probably care more about a lot of the fundamentals, right? You don't want to go into into something and have to spend $100 to make a transaction or something like that. But I do think I lost my train of thought. I do.
Much, Ben.
Yeah, no, I do think that like it'll stay, the market cap will stay lower than Ethereum. Oh yeah, the Binance Smart Chain, right? That was what I was going to go with. Because if you guys remember back in 2021, I mean, the Binance Smart Chain is extremely centralized, by basically all measures, or by most measures. But yet tons of people were like raving about it and the ecosystem and everything about it. But it's like, you guys do realize that like it's extremely centralized, But I sort of came to the realization back then in 2021 that while I care the most about decentralization, which is why I valued, say, like Ethereum over over a lot of the other options was because like, I just recognize people don't actually care about that. Like most people don't, right? Only like sort of the diehard users in the space care about that stuff. And I think a lot of people just care about the price momentum. And as well, I think a lot of chains are, I've sort of referred to them before as dinos. Like, they're decentralized in name only. Like, they claim decentralization, but I think a lot of chains have more control than even we think they do. Oftentimes, I mean, anytime something happens, it seems like that there is some power that the developers have to sort of like do something. Even anytime there's like a hack or something, you'll see like exchanges like freeze the addresses on their exchange. Which I mean, I know that's different, but sometimes when all that sort of stuff happens, like when things get frozen, I'm like, I mean, are we just calling it decentralized, the space decentralized? But at the end, all these things can get frozen at the end of the day, or at least a lot of them. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them can be. I think a lot of it is just it's a trilemma, right? It's a blockchain trilemma. You're trying to improve upon scalability, security, and decentralization, and I think Ethereum does. I mean, not including. I mean, just sort of leaving Bitcoin in a class of its own. But I think Ethereum does it the best. Sort of not giving up too much of any one of those three, but to try to make progress. I think Ethereum does it the best, and I think a lot of other layer ones make progress and are doing okay. But a lot of times, like if something's really, really fast, it's sacrificing somewhere else. Or if it's really secure, it's sacrificing somewhere else. Or if it's really decentralized, maybe it's not as fast or as secure. I mean, it really is the blockchain trilemma. So I feel like for every year there's new projects that pop up and they claim that they're better than Ethereum. But in my own opinion, right, which I'm sure many people would dispute, my own opinion, I think Ethereum does it sort of best without compromising too many other things. And I think the other blockchains are trying to get there, but I just think they're behind. And I also think that is reflected in the market cap. I mean, I think the market cap of Ethereum speaks for itself over the other layer ones.
Yeah. Well, that leads us nicely on, Ben, to let's talk about Ethereum a bit more, because yesterday was the date of the final testnet for Dencun. This is the latest big upgrade to Ethereum. This is the thing we're all supposed to get excited about now that the ETFs have been approved. So I believe today, yes, the 8th of February, I believe today is the ACDC, the All Core Developers Call, where they're going to, all the geekiest people in the Ethereum ecosystem are going to decide on a final date for this upgrade. And yeah, Ben, I think you make some very good points there about Ethereum. And I mean, just in terms of decentralization in general, I think there are so many ways to measure decentralization too. And you can talk about the number of validators, or the number of nodes, or the number of miners. But there's also things about where do blockchains store their data? I remember Solana used to store its data on Arweave, which is a decentralized data storage protocol, with its own, a crypto project, in other words.
Yeah.
But then switched to storing it on Google Bigtable, so it's sort of all there in one easily accessible place. So yeah, decentralization takes many forms. But yeah, Ethereum certainly by many measures is more decentralized than pretty much any other layer one. I think it's safe to say. But this Dencun upgrade is due to happen fairly soon. This is going to have big benefits for Ethereum, but mostly for the layer twos that are building on it. They are going to become faster and cheaper. So Rob, I know you sort of been paying a little bit of attention to this. what do you think will happen post Dencun? Do you think we could see, assuming it all goes to plan, do you think we could see more of a migration to Ethereum layer 2s? Do you think Ethereum's layer 2s are probably the biggest challengers to the likes of Solana and other layer 1s, alternate layer 1s, I should say?
Well, I mean, without watching your video that you guys put out yesterday on the Dencun upgrade, I would have said, no, it doesn't make any, but after I watched your video, well, first of all, it's two things. I appreciate, Guy, everything that you and your team does, because it's not just because I'm on the show, but like you guys go into so in depth into more of the technicals that I don't have time to even look at, and nobody has time to try to understand unless they actually are a developer and have a ton of time, which a lot of people don't have both of those. And then, but before I get into that, I just want to go back to what Ben talked about, because it struck me as one of those things where he said, Ben, you talked about the trilemma and how important it is. And then I started to hear the same type of, and he said, only the diehards, will warn us about that, right? They're really into the decentralization. And I thought about it, I go, it was the diehards that were telling all of us in, 2018, 2019, and 2020, like, hey, you shouldn't use exchanges. You shouldn't leave it on the exchanges because you know what can happen. It can go down, because we went through Mt. Gox and we were like, whatever, we know what's best for us. And then what happened? Voyager, Celsius, FTX, and BlockFi. So by Ben talking about this, about how important decentralization is, yeah, it sucks because, things don't work as fast. BNB, Binance Chain, works fantastic, but because it's decentralized. And when Ben said that nobody cares about it because when the price goes up, everybody's happy, there's a reason why it was number 3 or number 4. People did not care about decentralization. I think as we move forward, I think it will bite us in the A, but we'll see. So to get back to the original question about Ethereum and the Dencun upgrade, everybody who's watching this video, there's this great video put out by my friend Guy over at Coin Bureau. And Guy, do you just throw this up there? It's very comprehensive. And I will tell you something. Watch the whole video. It's like 27 minutes or something like that. Because if you were like me and just watched half of it, you're like, oh, this is perfect. Ethereum's going to go. I should probably, sell my house and go, YOLO into Ethereum and sell everything. But then when you get to the end, you're like, holy smokes, maybe not. So of course, Guy, and then you talked about this on the screen. Ethereum's Dencun upgrade goes live on the second testnet. And then today is the day, again, about the AC/DC. Testing went very well, and so on and so forth. And then I just put this together. This is what it comes down to me. If you could throw this up. Everybody watch the video. But if you don't have time to watch the video, this is essentially what Guy said. Let me present the right piece here under the tab, sorry.
I promise I don't look quite so constipated throughout the whole video. It's just in that. It's just in that particular.
See there, you look good.
Oh, and like, that one as well.
You're like, hey, I have prune juice. Everything's good. So like on this one, you pretty much laid it out. All these different EIPs. Like I don't have time to look all this stuff. So thanks for doing this. Data discard after every transaction. Storage is cheaper. And this is what got me the 4788. There's a built-in oracle now, which means that the external oracles are not needed. So I was thinking about this as far as like our favorite oracle, which would be Chainlink. I'm like, what does that mean for Chainlink? Well, that's up for you to decide. I can't, tell you, but I will say that Chainlink is moving beyond just the whole oracle and it kind of being like a layer 0 as far as like real world assets. The other one, self-destruct. These 3 validator nodes and the last 2 smart contracts can access data blobs. And that's just kind of comes to sharding, which is the last one. And when I was watching this, you were talking about, it's going to be reduction in fees. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be 45 to 100x faster. But then later you said, that's L2s. L1s, there's no gas reduction. And at the very end, you said, this could take years. It's not going to happen like they're going to flip a switch. So I was like, oh my God, I can't. This is going to take that long. That's an eternity in this industry. So yeah, I think this will be great for L2s, 10 to 100x cheaper. But as far as like the L1, it could be something major. So that's essentially what I got out of it. And then there was a little diagram which makes no sense to anybody. And I'm sorry for the uncharted network. It just kind of breaks everything down as far as dank sharding, dank sharding, and uncharted network. I can see how it'll be faster, but we'll see how it goes. It's a great thing, but I remember a lot of other EIPs talking about how they're going to reduce the actual fees, and then it went through and it didn't happen. We're like, what happened to it? And the only one that's, it's the fees are always interchangeable with the Bitcoin fees now. So it's like the dream of decentralization, and just like getting back to what Ben said, I mean, the dream of that is, it's great, but unfortunately we're paying for it, and you're paying for it in the L1s.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's I think it was the London upgrade a couple of years ago, where people were getting excited about fees potentially going down. And it was like, no, the fees stay the same. It's just that some of them then get burned as a result. So so ETH technically becomes deflationary with enough activity. And I remember there were a lot of people were sort of like, I'd rather have cheaper fees.
Yeah, I'd rather have cheaper fees, but like Ben was saying, Ben, you can talk to this. If you want more decentralization, you're gonna have to go through that fire road, and if you want to stick with it, you got to stick with it. And that's really what it comes down. That's why, like, I hold Ethereum. It's probably my second biggest asset in my portfolio, Bitcoin being number one.
Yeah, and of course, I guess with centralization, that's what we've already got. That's why the likes of Visa and other payment networks are so popular and so powerful. They give us the illusion of cheap transactions. I don't think a lot of people realize, that the actual transaction fees are now so baked in that we forget that we're actually paying them by paying for more expensive goods. But they are, this centralization from the likes of Visa, it offers a supposedly cheaper and certainly more user-friendly experience, doesn't it? So you don't have to, and I guess, at the moment we still have to pay the actual price for decentralization, but the price of centralization, like with Solana, you get cheap fees, but then you also apparently seem to have to put up with the blockchain going down. And it doesn't seem like too much damage was done with that outage. I'm sure some people might disagree with me, but I guess it could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. But even like as much as the outage was bad, didn't affect the price too much. So here we are.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on, gents. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit of macro as well on this. And Ben, I in particular, I want to pick your brains on this one. So we had US job numbers just recently. They were impressive. I think they added something like 350,000 or something jobs. Unemployment stayed relatively low. So the Fed, Jerome, in his most recent press conference, said the Fed is watching the data. So given these US job numbers and everything else that's happened recently, and that recent Fed press conference, has this data changed your view of when this pivot that we're all waiting for might come? Has your view on kind of the Fed's policy changed at all recently?
It certainly changed the market's view. I think going into this year, everyone was very convinced of a March rate cut. That all seems off the table at this point. Powell basically said they're not going to. He said that they're just likely not going to have enough data between now and March to decide on a rate cut. And I think that or more so, I think that the discussion is likely shifting from a March rate cut to whether we even need a May rate cut. The Atlanta Fed is forecasting, Q1 annualized real GDP to be, I believe, 3.4%. I will say about the job report, there is a lot of like seasonal adjustment factors that go in January, which often make January a lot higher than the other months. In fact, it was exactly a year ago that we got another really hot jobs report in January, where we added over 500,000 jobs. And then that sort of faded. Some of those jobs then were revised down a few months later. And then we saw, February, March, April, and May, I believe, show, lower numbers. So I do think it likely has shifted the first rate cut out. And a lot of people will say, well, how does that affect me as an investor? I think the reason is because, and I know it's sort of a meme at this point, but I think that the lower risk assets, like your Bitcoin in crypto, or whether it's like the mega cap tech stocks in, like in the NASDAQ or the S&P 500, people keep going on and on and on about, oh, well, the S&P is only up because of like, these 6 or 7 companies, right? But that's actually a lot. That happens a lot of times in the market, and that's why it's really hard to beat the S&P 500, because if you stock pick, then you're basically saying exactly which ones are going to outperform. Whereas if you just buy the S&P, you're going to capture the ones that are going parabolic. And while you also own some in the stocks that are not, the ones that are going parabolic that are like super high market cap are outweighing everything else. So. But I still think we're in that process right now. And I know a lot of people have kind of given up on it, but as it relates to crypto, I mean, Bitcoin continues to take back more and more market share as time goes on, right? Like it's been a slow journey. I mean, we from like mid 2021 all the way out until today, it's been a slow journey, but Bitcoin continues to take that market share. And if you're thinking about like, well, when will the altcoins start to durably outperform Bitcoin? It's probably not until we get those rate cuts. And I think the reason is because, while there's a lot of people like us that are still here that, I mean, it seems like everyone's just kind of like watching the prices go up. There's still not a lot of like, I mean, I track the social interest in the space. Like there's not, it's trending down, like it's not trending up. And I'm sure all of you guys can see that on your own YouTube channels and on Twitter. I mean, like growth right now has basically halted in terms of like new people coming into the space. And I think it makes sense. I mean, if you're not already in the space, like why would you only just join now? I think it's going to take looser monetary policy. I think it's going to take it, for those people that are hurting at the margins and stuff that, they're struggling to pay rent. They can't think about which altcoin do I buy this week. They're thinking about, how do I put food on the table this week? And so as sort of ironic as it is, the longer it takes for the Fed to go to looser rates, the increased likelihood of a hard landing. And again, like that doesn't mean we have to have a hard landing. There are examples in history where we've avoided a hard landing. 1967 is an example. In the mid 1990s, there was an example where we basically just had a soft landing. So it is possible. But I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen all the charts on Twitter or on X, like where people are talking about, oh, well, like delinquencies are going up. Like credit card delinquencies, like all that is sort of trending higher. And for now, the market doesn't care because it's still relatively low. I think a lot of those trends are still like below the pre-pandemic levels, or they're only just now getting back to the pre-pandemic levels. So I think the market has largely shrugged it off, right? So the longer that inflation stays sticky, the longer that these job reports continue to come in very optimistic, that's going to just delay the Fed actually cutting. And if it delays it too long, then instead of getting, sort of a token 25 basis point rate cut just to throw us a bone, then you could run into an issue where you get like a 200 basis point rate cut because the Fed is panicking to cut rates because they just simply they waited too long. Because the issue with monetary policy is that it operates with long and variable lags. So, by the time, like let's say in May the unemployment rate prints 4%. Okay. And, we're past the Bitcoin halving. We're past potentially either the approval or rejection of the ETH spot ETF. And let's say you get a 4% print, a 25 basis point rate cut isn't going to reverse that print anytime soon, right? You'd have to really get aggressive with it. And so I think that's sort of the main concern. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be an investor. I'm not saying that because it's impossible to time these things. The way that I do it is I just keep Rob said Ethereum was his number 2 holding. I mean, it's my number 2 holding as well, but my number 1 holding is Bitcoin. And it's still 99% of my crypto portfolio because it just seems like it will be the place to be until we go back to looser rates. It's the same way, that's the same way. Just like it's the place to be, with mega cap tech. I mean, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all these companies, they keep going up, but it's because people don't want to throw their money in, the random smaller companies
Right.
because they don't know if they're going to survive the rate hiking cycle. We don't know. And I think the companies with larger balance sheets that have a lot of cash on hand, they can survive, right? They can survive. We don't know which other ones are going to survive. And so that's why if you look at like the Russell 2000 against the Nasdaq or against the S&P 500, the Russell is underperforming the Nasdaq, worse than it has in like 20 years or something, because everyone wants to pile into the companies they know will survive and avoid like the plague, the ones that they really don't know if they're going to survive. Because I guess the question is too, is even when a rate cut happens, is it going to move the needle for the for the consumer? The way you move the needle is you cut several hundred basis points. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. I think that a March rate cut is likely off the table unless something catastrophic happens between now and then, which probably won't. And so I think we basically just shift it out to May and say, well, perhaps May will be the time we finally get a rate cut. But even in May, there's still a 35% chance that they don't cut in May, according to the CME group. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Powell, how many times have they told us there's only going to be 3 rate cuts this year? And how many times does the market not believe them? So, maybe this is going to be the year where they only cut, 2 or 3 times, and everyone else just constantly keeps thinking that they're gonna come more. Actually, in 2019, during the last at the end of the last rate hiking cycle in 2019, when they started to cut rates, they cut 3 times in 2019. They cut in July, I believe, and then like September, October, November, somewhere in there. It was like they cut in July. I think they paused for a month or something, and then they cut 2 more times. So I could see it being kind of like that, where you get 3 rate cuts this year, and then maybe more rate cuts come next year.
Hey, Ben, just to follow up real quick, tell me, so when they start cutting, what do you think about this? When they start cutting rates, when does the quantitative easing start to really go in? And not just like slightly, but they really start, we should start printing money. Because this is what I learned from you, where you just overlaid the M2 money supply over the S&P 500 and also the entire crypto market, and just went in the same trajectory as everything else. So I always look at it like, when is the money printer really go on, and what, especially with these rate cuts in potentially May, who knows?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because someone actually asked Powell about that, because they're not really the same thing, right? Like you have, and I'm going to try to share my screen over here. Let's see if I can share this. All right, let me know if you can see that.
Yep, got it.
So like if you look at the last cycle, you can see that. So the green line here are interest rates, and then the let me make this a color that is a little bit easier to see. The white line, this is essentially like the balance sheet of the Fed, right? So the white line is the balance sheet of the Fed. The green line is just showing you the effective federal funds rate. So last cycle, you can see that they really started to cut rates here in July of 2019. And right around the same time that they started to cut rates, that's where the white line, where they started to increase the balance of they started to increase their balance sheet right here. So last cycle, they basically did it simultaneously. They started to lower interest rates and increase the size of their balance sheet at essentially the same time. And that's where, that's precisely where altcoins stopped bleeding to Bitcoin, right? Like exactly at that spot. And you can see it extremely clearly, right? Like with the dominance. Look, if it actually pulls up. But yeah, like you see this, the purple line here, where it all happened at the exact same time, right? Like the Fed started increasing the size of their balance sheet right there. That's exactly where Bitcoin dominance topped out. And they also started to lower interest rates all at the same time, So that's why I go back to that idea of, they could lower their balance sheet starting whenever they start to cut rates. But Powell has said, there was a reporter that asked him a few months ago if they would do that, and he said there could be some divergence in that, like they don't technically have to. But I will say I don't know that I necessarily believe that answer, because at the last meeting, when someone asked Powell about the balance sheet, he actually said that they're going to start discussing balance sheet issues in March, right? So they haven't thought about it up until this point. I think in March they're going to start discussing it, and they're actually really close to the point where they were last cycle. And this is the last thing I'll say, because I know we're getting a little bit beyond what people care about, but
hey, I care.
if you look, I mean, if you just look at how much they decreased the size of their balance sheet last cycle, they decreased it by about 16%. Okay. And then if you go if you go look at it here, it's reduced about 15%. Right. Okay. So it could end up playing out like almost a very similar way. And it's funny because rate cuts in 2019 started in July. And I'm like, gosh, there's no way they're going to make it till July, right? Like, could they really make it until July? Probably not. Maybe it'll be like May or June. But I just thought it was an interesting way to, look at the market to see like maybe this time's not different. And they're just going to reduce the balance sheet about 16% and then start to go up again.
No. It's this time is different for sure. Just kidding. Hey, Ben. Before we go on, can you bring up that chart one more time, because it looked like the Bitcoin dominance went down. The one that you showed in the very beginning, where the Bitcoin dominance went down a little bit because of the rate cuts, and then as they expanded their balance sheet. But there was a peak right after that. Is that the coronavirus time? See where it goes down there, and then it drops off, and then it spikes back up. In the purple line's the Bitcoin dominance, right? Yeah.
So basically, this here is where Bitcoin dominance topped,
right? And then it went down
in the QT phase of the business cycle, right? And then here is where Bitcoin dominance topped in the QE phase of the business cycle. So
and
that's where Bitcoin. No, that was December of 2020 when Bitcoin was going parabolic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when Bitcoin goes parabolic, it always takes back market share. Sure. Because nothing can keep pace with, like, everyone just piles back into Bitcoin when Bitcoin's going up, and then when Bitcoin stalls out, that's when everyone goes into the altcoins. And I think everyone keeps trying to do that, right? They keep saying, oh wait, now Bitcoin's going to finally lose steam, and the altcoins are going to start to outperform. Oh, now Ethereum's going to finally go up. But then what happens? You wait a few more weeks, and then Bitcoin just continues to steal back the show. And again, and it's the same reason why the Magnificent Seven. It's just, we haven't seen a shift in monetary policy, and until we do, this is likely going to be the trend.
Yeah, and then because I was thinking that if that's December 2019, I guess, and then January 2020, I was thinking like right around March is when we saw the cerveza sickness came out, and I think that was like one of the times when I would think that people would like kind of FOMO back in, because they're like, this is the less risky asset.
Right. So, I mean, basically, no. So going into the crash in March of 2020, the dominance did go up exactly for that very reason, right? I think you're right. But following the crash, that was where Bitcoin dominance, like that's where altcoins started to outperform a lot in the short term, because rates were basically at zero, and everyone was just loving all the cheap money. So then if you're printing a lot of money, that money's got to find a home. And so that's where they seek out the riskiest of assets when you're just, in QE on steroids.
That's right. Because I remember March 15th when they said, okay, we're going to start printing. And everybody's like, great, I'm going to pile all the way into the S&P. I'm going to pile all the way into these risky assets because it was free money. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. But right now,
sorry everybody.
The QT phase.
Okay.
A quick question to both of you, because Ben, I agree with you 100% on this idea of until the Fed cuts rates, until liquidity improves, until people have money to spare to put into crypto. I don't think we can realistically expect the sort of pump that a lot of people do. Do both of you feel that the crypto market is entirely dependent on things like rates, on things like macro, or do you think there's anything that crypto itself could do or that could happen, for crypto to sort of negate that to let crypto pump on its own? I'm not sure if I phrased that question terribly well, but do you think there are any sort of crypto specific factors that could lift the market regardless of what's happening with interest rates, etc.?
I mean, everybody talks about it with the ETFs and with Grayscale dumping. They say, hey, Grayscale at some point is going to stop dumping. It's just how it is. But then people will say, well, what about DCG Group and everything else beside that? And then Mt. Gox, and we all know the whole thing. So like, I just look at it like this. I think that there is a lot of positivity out there for us to really go up. But where has the market gone? I think we just today hit 1.8 trillion, and we've been oscillating between like 1.6 trillion, 1.75, somewhere around there for like the longest time, even though we've had probably the most positive bullish news. Now moving forward, I think it's going to do great. But right now, like, unless we have, I always look at it like this, like the macro has to be positive. I know people will say, well, people will get into Bitcoin and the alts because it's a great store of value and everything else. But historically, you don't really see it as people believe it's going to happen. And it's actually happens kind of like the opposite. So I still take a look at it like the macro has to be good, jobs have to be good, everything has to be good for everybody to go, okay, I'm going to try this and get into it. I personally am way more into crypto than and Bitcoin and everything else than I maybe should be, but that's because I believe in it so much. But it's taken a lot of time for the people to really understand what it is. And that's how I see it, unless Ben might have a different opinion.
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, like, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not saying, it can't. I mean, Bitcoin's up 3x off the lows, right? Like, it's not like it can't go up during QT. I'm just saying that I think it will continue to absorb market share until we get back to looser monetary policy. I think that's what I think that is why social interest in crypto, if you just look at viewership, I think that's why it's gone down. Is because while Bitcoin is, it's the king, people don't care about that. They care about their altcoins, right? They care about, they care about, your Solanas and your Cardanos and your Polkadot and your Dogecoin even, right? Chainlink, Matic, right? They care about all that stuff. And they want to see that stuff go parabolic. And until that stuff goes parabolic, it really doesn't, there's still a lot of people that are just like, yeah, like it's nice that these, altcoins are up off their lows. But the problem is that the masses bought these altcoins at multiples of where they are today. Like back in 2021, like they bought them many times what the current valuations are. So there's still a ton of bag holders, right? So yeah, they're looking at the price. We're like, all right, great. Now I'm only down 50%. So I think that is, and I think so. Yeah, like the prices can, of course, I mean, Bitcoin can still trend higher, but that sort of that shift from Bitcoin into altcoins, that normally doesn't actually happen in a durable manner until at two different phases. The first phase is after a Fed pivot, and then the second phase is after Bitcoin hits new all-time highs. Because as we showed on the chart earlier that Rob pointed out, that second spike in Bitcoin dominance occurred during QE, and it was when Bitcoin was going parabolic.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I saw a Telegram message pop up on my screen as you were saying this, because this leads me into my last question, which is, are there any particular events, dates, in the coming year? Because I think we're all agreed that it's going to be an eventful year for crypto, one way or another. But before you answer that, I just want to show you this. I got from Woo Blockchain, which is a very good Telegram account to follow. So this is hot off the press. The precise moment of the Dencun upgrade on the main Ethereum network, no more testnets, also known as a hard fork, will trigger when the blockchain reaches slot blah 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 blah, 13:55 UTC on the 13th of March. So there we are. We have a date for the Dencun upgrade. And a few people have pointed out in the comments as well that Bitcoin has hit 45K.
Hey, we did it.
We did it.
Just this stream. This is fantastic.
Once again, NFA reliably pumps the markets, as we do every week in, week out. So going back to that original question, is there anything particular on your radar? It could be it could be kind of related to crypto things, or just things that you've got planned. Rob, I if I remember rightly, you're planning to do Europe at some point. Is that right?
Yeah, Europe, and then maybe just a quick tour around the States, because it's fun.
Okay.
It's great to be in Puerto Rico, but sometimes you got to get off the rock, and we'll do that. So yeah, looking to go back, do a little traveling. Will be a consensus this year in Austin, and that's the big thing. So as far as like that, Dubai and things like, maybe that'll happen. I know I've gotten a lot of requests, but we'll see. I'd love to go over there and check out your backyard, guy, but not sure.
You're always welcome, Rob.
Thanks.
You're always welcome. We'll keep a welcome in the hillsides, and a shisha pipe ready. Ben, have you got any big plans this year? I know you're a very busy man, with home life and children, etc. But are you getting out on the road at all? Any plans for that?
Not really. I think we might go on vacation sometime in like after the kids get out of school.
Yeah.
Like to the beach.
The beach.
We're actually going to one of those indoor water parks this weekend. I believe that's this weekend.
You don't sound hugely enthusiastic about that, Ben.
Well, the funny thing is when you go on vacation with kids, it's more so vacation for the kids because you end up just like changing diapers and all that other stuff the whole time, right? You're not like and making sure the kids don't drown, that kind of stuff. We went skiing a few weeks ago. So that was fun. That was our kids' first time skiing ever. So that was good. And our 7-year-old picked it up pretty quickly, actually.
Nice.
Our 4-year-old is he was sort of getting it, but he still needs some time practicing. But
natural athletes there.
Yeah. My wife keeps trying to persuade me. My wife is very fond of skiing, and she keeps trying to persuade me to come. And I just, when you just know that you'll be bad at something and you'll probably hurt yourself doing it. That's me with skiing. I'm not touching it.
That's what they create the lounge for, so you can go there and drink after you're done.
It's a lot of fun to the sort of the freedom of just like zooming down the mountain. I have one funny story. I was like, when I was like one of the first times I ever skied, I was going down one of the green trails.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's like the green, there's the blues, there's obviously like the black diamonds.
Black diamond.
Yeah. Well, I was going down the green one, and I wasn't good enough to like slow down as quickly as I needed. This was many years ago.
Yeah.
And I got ahead of the people I was with because I just couldn't slow down. And then I missed my turn, and I ended up going down a much harder trail. I think it was a blue. It wasn't like a black diamond or something. But I remember like wiping out, like I completely wiped out. And I was like a few feet away from a tree when I like finally like came to. And I was like, oh, I'm really glad I did not hit that tree. But yeah, no, that was it's fun. It's also, you have to be like responsible and know what you're doing, but it's a lot of fun. And it's always fun to see the snowboarders out there too, because that looks insanely hard. I've only done skiing.
Nice.
Mrs. Guy snowboards, apparently. Are you good at it?
That's what I do most of the time.
It's what she does most of the time.
Sometimes
Oh, nice.
It looks a lot harder than skiing for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so possible skiing, and then Rob visiting. Where are you going in Europe, Rob? Have you got any particular plans for that? Is there anywhere that should be watching the hell out?
Nah, Spain for sure. We got to go there, and then I don't know. We'll see where it goes from there. That's the great thing about Europe. You get on the train, super cheap, go wherever you want to go.
Yeah. And it takes less time than it would to drive down the road to the store in Texas, I imagine.
Exactly. I don't know why the United States doesn't have this. It's a great mode of transportation. No idea.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I mean, I guess take things like holidays while you can get them, because as I say, I think there's so much going to be happening with crypto this year. What with halvings and Dencun upgrades and possible rate cuts and stuff. It's going to be pretty interesting at times, I think. So yeah, if you get the chance to go on holiday, take it. Okay, we're running out of time, but I'll just pull up a couple of questions. Someone asking a more sort of macro focus. Ben, is the S&P getting over 5,000? And if not, is the crypto market following down for a bit? Have you got any particular thoughts on that?
I mean, I think I guess the S&P didn't tag it yet, did it? But ES did. The mini futures, it's already over 5,000 right now. So I mean, a lot of times when it gets to these round numbers, it likes to just keep trying until it breaks. Yeah, I mean, it certainly could. I've honestly, I'm not I wouldn't say that my prediction skills on the S&P 500 are better than anyone else's. But I mean, my view on it is that the S&P, unless the market has fundamentally changed for Bitcoin, which you could argue it has because of the spot ETF, like there's more access to Wall Street than there previously was. But at least last business cycle, the S&P stayed, resilient a little bit longer than Bitcoin did. So as long as Bitcoin hasn't thrown in the towel, then it's possible that the S&P could continue to climb the wall of worry. If Bitcoin, at some point shows weakness, and that would imply that because I don't know if you guys, a lot of times it seems like Bitcoin kind of leads in some aspects, right? Like if Bitcoin starts to go down, then a lot of times the S&P will eventually follow, or if Bitcoin goes up, a lot of times the S&P will eventually follow.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Ben. Rob, I wanted to push this question your way. This is from Douglas Baker, who I think is a long time watcher of the show. Thanks, Doug. So, because I know that you've worked with quite a few sort of projects starting up in the space, and I'm curious to know. Like, I think this is a good question, or a good, probably a fairly true statement. It's almost impossible to create a successful Web3 project without centralization to start it up. In your experience, Rob, working with projects, is this something that you found? Is this something that generally tends to get discussed? Is further decentralization on the roadmap a lot of the time, or is it kind of swept under the rug?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a prime example. On my second channel on Dan Degen, I gave away this meme coin called Myro. And what we did is we used the Solana address, because it's on the Solana chain. And a lot of people, they didn't have a wallet. So I said, well, download one or two wallets. You can use Phantom or one called Titus Wallet. And when I was using it, I was using the Titus Wallet. And for a reason, I'll explain a little bit, is that it just stopped working totally. The Titus wallet just stopped working and I couldn't do anything. So I just switched over to the Phantom wallet and do all the giveaways. Very fast, very easy, great, right? So when I talked to the founders of Titus, I'm like, hey, what the heck happened? Like, oh, well, it's because like we don't use AWS. We don't use Google, which is a centralized platform. What we do is we use Akash, and that's a decentralized where we can store everything. So they were doing an update, and during that 2-hour window, that's when you were streaming, and that's why it didn't work. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why can't you just use AWS? But again, it goes back to what Ben was talking about. So to answer Douglas's question, it doesn't happen all the time. It makes things a hell of a lot easier, I'll tell you that. But as the future moves on, again, the downfalls of the past, I think, will bite us in the A. And I think that it's better to go decentralized, although it's just going to be more cumbersome and difficult.
Great answer. Great answer. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. One final question then. There were the skiing. The talk about skiing really got people going. I saw Not Meme says, "I go for hot chocolate by the fire." So that's the view on skiing. That's I can get on board with that. That sounds like my sort of jag. Harris Softic asks, do you guys think that now with the ETFs, volatility will diminish and crypto cycles will get longer? Is this something that you guys have considered at all?
That's a Ben question.
I don't think I'm ever going to talk about cycles getting longer again. I do think that I do think it will diminish. Is my guess. Diminishing returns is just something that happens. I mean, it's hard. It just takes exponentially more money to move the market. So I would assume that we would see diminishing returns. Like if you think back to last cycle, there were a lot of like 300K price predictions for Bitcoin. And one of the reasons I think 300K was put out there was because it was about 100x off the bottom, because like the bottom was 3,100, and so 300K was 100x off the bottom. And I think the reason that people arrived at that 100x number is because the cycle before Bitcoin essentially went up 100x. It went from like 176, around $200, up to $20,000. So it went up that 100x move. So then a lot of people were saying, oh, well, if it does 100x again, then surely, you know, we'll be at 300K. The problem is the cycle before that one, Bitcoin had gone up like 500x, right? Yeah. So it was like 500x, then 100x, and then it was like 20x or so. So, I mean, you can see like by a factor of like, you know, approximately 5, it's not exact. But, you know, you can see that there's been these diminishing returns from one cycle to another. And so I would definitely agree with that. I think that could eventually, like, I feel like eventually we'll go into some other type of price action, like, you know, many cycles from now. Because unfortunately the ultimate, I mean, if diminishing returns go on forever, then it basically just means you asymptotically go to 1 to some degree, or, you know, in terms of your returns in a future cycle. So I think eventually it'll change, but I don't think we're at that point yet. I mean, yeah. So I do think certainly we will see diminishing returns. If not, if you don't see diminishing returns, you'd have to go up, you know, more than 20x off the low. So I mean, if you're looking at a price that's more than 20x off the low, then you could start to make the argument that it's no longer a thing.
Okay. Beautifully done. Which brings us, well, we've been going pretty much exactly an hour. So I think that's it for today. So Ben, thank you very much. Rob,
thanks for having me.
Always a good
Great
time.
to see you guys.
And I guess next week will be on my channel.
Yes. Next week, Ben's channel, Into the Cryptoverse. Let's hope the markets will be as green then as they are today. Thank you everyone for watching. So next week on Ben's channel, usual time. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Ben and Rob's channels if you're not already. We will see you then. Guys, thank you very much.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.